Welcome back to the FRINX Open Daylight distribution. In this demo we'll create an L2VPN connection between two routers, PE1 and PE2. I'm running the FRINX Open Daylight distribution locally and I've installed two additional features. First of all, the L2VPN, and the second feature I installed was RESTconf, which enables me to communicate between FRINX Open Daylight and the routers by using REST calls. For our REST client, I'm using Postman, which you can download for free. And in Postman, I'm using an environment variable here for the IP address of the FRINX Open Daylight distribution, which in my case is the localhost 127.0.0.1. Using an environment variable in Postman makes it easier to switch between environments because it saves you from having to change the ODL IP for every REST call. So the first thing I had to do in preparing to configure the L2VPN connection was to use REST calls to establish a netconf connection between FRINX Open Daylight and the two routers. So I used a separate REST call to connect to each router in turn, PE1 and PE2. So if we look within the body of these calls, you can see that I've specified an IP address for the router and also credentials, username and password. So you see the IP address is different for each router. I then used a GET REST call to the operational data store of FRINX Open Daylight to get confirmation that it had connected successfully to routers PE1 and PE2. So having done that, we're now ready to set up the L2VPN connection. But before we do so, I'll check the routers to ensure that there's no L2VPN connection currently set up. So first of all, PE1. Okay, no configuration. And we can see in router PE2 that there's no L2VPN connection set up there either. So there are two steps required to configure an L2VPN connection. In the first REST call, we have to create a template which will then be used by the second REST call. So if we look at the body of the first REST call, we see that there's not much to it. We're using a PW template, and here PW indicates that it's a pseudo-wire template. And we also specify that for this pseudo-wire template we want to use control word preferred and MPLS encapsulation. So I'm ready to send this call. And I get back status 201 created. And then the second REST call is slightly more detailed. So we can assign a name first of all for the L2VPN instance, and we can assign a type, which in this case is VPWS. And then we've got a pseudo-wire section where we configure two pseudo-wires, one for router PE1 and one for router PE2. So for clarity, we can include in the name the router in which we want to set up this connection. And for template, we use the template which we set up in the previous REST call. Peer IP is the IP of the interface which we'll be connecting to on this pseudo-wire. So for this template which we're configuring now, which is PE1, the IP will be the address of the interface which we're connecting to in router PE2. And in this case, when we're configuring router PE2, the IP address is the IP of the interface on router PE1, and we also specify the ID of the pseudowire template, and finally we specify the VLAN ID. So we can now send this call and we get status 201 created, and finally we need to commit via RPC and we get status complete, which means it was a success. So let's go back now and check the configuration of the routers. First of all, PE1. So we now see that we've got an L2VPN instance configured in this router. And we can see the template that was used is the one we set up in the REST call, which was template PW1. And we also see that the L2VPN setup created a sub-interface on interface gigabit Ethernet 0000, and the 3001 is the VLAN. And we also see neighbor IP, and this is the IP of the interface at the other end of the connection, so at the PE2 end. So we should see the opposite setup on router PE2. And here we have it. It's a similar configuration as we saw in PE1, and in this case the IP for neighbor is that of the interface on router PE1. So if we then want to delete the L2VPN instance, we can use another 2 REST calls. First of all, we delete the template and we should get status 200 OK. Then we delete the instance, again status OK. And again we use RPC to commit, and we get status complete. So when we check the routers again now, there is no such configuration on router PE1. And there's also no configuration shown on router PE2. Thanks for watching, and please do check the blog section of our website, FRINX.io, for the latest news.